Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Goolsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
You know, you're not in the best recording environment today, but I know that's your favorite place, so I guess it's okay.
No, it's not. Are you talking about the actual establishment I'm in, or the place that I'm in?
Your favorite restaurant, top three at least, right? Got to be.
Yeah, definitely not. One of the few that I won't eat.
Yeah, so Mark is coming to you live today from some random McDonald's in Michigan.
In northern Michigan. Well, I hope people appreciate the dedication here. You know, we want to continue to bring you content, and we have other things going on in our lives at the same time, so, we're doing what we can.
Yeah, and I guess if we can't get a couple in today, we might be doing the same thing with me next week, so
yeah.
I better go ahead and call ahead to that place I'm staying and make sure they have good Wi-Fi. Did you just open your Happy Meal?
Yeah, apparently so.
I hear you giggling
apparently
over there.
So. No.
All right. So, on a more serious note, we were talking about, having some discussion that was kind of loosely centered around the topic of poults today.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic for several reasons. One, we're right in the middle of poult rearing and a lot of the range of turkeys. Two, I'm getting tagged in a bunch of comments and pictures sent to me and saying things like that. Folks are seeing a lot of poults.
Yeah, if there's one thing they love to share, it's pictures and videos of poults.
Yeah, which I'm behind that.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
That's a good sign that the next generation of turkeys is going to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're seeing poults that are already flighted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
a really good sign.
If they're getting up to chicken size, then it's a really, really good sign.
Yeah. So there have been a few questions about that. We've also gotten some questions in the, our survey that we link each time. There's several poult-related questions, so I thought it'd be a good time. I think there's some uncertainty from the community on different things about their biology and management at that life stage. And it's, kind of timely, so I think it's a good topic.
It's definitely timely. So one of the questions that I get a lot on this topic is there a way to monitor them? There's folks that want to keep up with, maybe not as formal as going all the way to, coming up with a recruitment estimate, but they want something that they can use to monitor trends in reproductive success on their property. So there's not really an established protocol for that, but I figured we could at least talk about some ideas that if a landowner wanted to try them, they would maybe at least get them in the ballpark. So what comes to mind immediately for you in that regard?
Well, I think the most obvious thing that comes to mind is camera trails.
Mm-hmm.
People put out trail cameras. Most landowners have trail cameras out, throughout the year. And we think about those and their value for deer really commonly, but I don't know that as many people focus on the value of cameras and what they can tell you. So let's think about some things that you can get from cameras if you're running them.
Okay.
I think one obvious thing is you can start to get estimates of how many poults per hen you have.
Right.
And for a large portion of the that life stage, they're pretty easy to distinguish from the adults.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably, I would guess, the most beneficial thing in terms of monitoring how reproductive success is going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people are sending me. I mean, I had one recently that a picture of 3 hens with 15 poults that were all chicken size.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good indicator that things are going well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I'm talking about them in that size class because we know from various sources of research that the gauntlet, so to speak, the bottleneck on survival is really in that first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Pre-flight, they haven't grown their feathers in that are insulating, that allow them to fly, and they die to exposure and predation and
Mm-hmm.
a million other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is a really good sign. If you're seeing poults regularly on camera that already have grown in their feathers, that's a good sign.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And on that note, one of the things that I get asked about a lot is, someone will send me a picture. I'm sure they send you pictures too, and ask you, how old is this poult?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
Google search can help you out with that a lot. There are various state agencies out there who have posted photos, and they can give you, an estimate of like a 1 to 2 week age class range.
Yeah. Yeah.
For various poults. So those are great resources. Probably the one that I use the most and point people to the most is Tennessee's, because they started. Their coordinator is Roger Shields, right? Isn't that right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that he put together a training, or he worked with some other folks in the agency to put together a training slideshow kind of thing that you can access. It's if you just search like Tennessee wild turkey survey, you should be able to find it pretty easily. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just called a wild turkey quiz survey. And it's hosted on the SurveyMonkey website. But anyways, it's got a series of photos that you can scroll through, and it will actually give you a score on how accurately you judge the poults in the various photos. So
Yeah.
that quiz can be really useful for learning and becoming more effective at that. But one of the other things that I wanted to put to you, Marcus, was, let's just say that I'm a landowner and I've done kind of what you described. Let's say maybe I've put 1 or more cameras on each of my fields, because those are areas where hens with broods are likely to show up. Maybe on my larger fields, I've got 2 or 3 cameras around the periphery trying to catch them if they come in at different places or something along those lines. But how many cameras or fields do I need to be monitoring, and how large do you think the property needs to be before you actually have some confidence in what you're seeing? Or does it just change the inferences that you make based on what you see? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a difficult question. I mean, this is one of the things we're trying to address with research, right? Is
Right.
what scale do we need to be operating at? And, if you're going to use cameras to try to get a reliable estimate in a given area, what does the density need to look like? How do you
Mhm.
target areas? I think
Right.
that makes a lot of sense to target fields.
Mhm.
And I like that approach better than what I see a lot, because you're setting the cameras up to take advantage of them using areas that are potentially, if it's being managed well, high quality cover,
Mhm.
as opposed to putting it on a feeder, for example, where you're
Right.
kind of setting, you're trying to monitor them in a place where they're probably not very successful. They're at least
Mhm.
more vulnerable generally.
Mhm.
Uh, I think the jury's still out on some of those things, but we do know from a variety of sources that the early successional plant communities that are forb dominated are generally what hens select, and
Mhm.
the poults are generally more successful
Yeah.
in that situation. So targeting those kinds of areas, you're taking advantage of her behavior, and
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine that is important in terms of getting an accurate estimate.
Right.
And in terms of the scale, I don't have a good answer for that. I think if you have a few hundred acres and you're putting out, let's say, you have a few hundred acres, what I see really commonly is to have maybe 3 to 5, maybe up to 10% of that in food plots, or if you include all openings, certainly
Mm-hmm.
could get up, in that range. And if you have 5% of your area in plots that you think are good brooding cover, I don't see a reason why you couldn't put a camera on
Mm-hmm.
all of them.
Yeah, and I mean, you could even like have a section or even the entire perimeter of the food plot be dedicated to brooding cover, as we've talked
Yeah,
about before. And you could, just thinking about going in and planting a fall food plot. Well, if you're in the deep south, I mean, some people are planting as late as November, and so you could just, really, if you're using conventional tillage and you till that field, just leave a portion of it unplanted and let it come back in native forbs after you've disked it in wintertime. And a lot of times you'll get a lot of beneficial stuff back and attract poults to that area for viewing
yeah,
um, and recording the data. But that's the way that I would do it. Is I would have a series of cameras on all of my openings, areas that I know that poults are going to frequent, and I would make sure which is very important if people want to keep up with this over time, that I do it the same way every year.
yeah. I think that's another important part, is to try to standardize your effort.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another thing that I guess it's a word of caution. I'm just talking about people in general. We tend to have confirmation bias.
Mm,
So you see a hen with some poults one time, and then everybody's like, "Oh man, they're doing awesome."
mm-hmm.
And it's just based on seeing a hen maybe with a bunch of poults. Maybe they're, what I see commonly is, oh, I saw a hen with 12 poults, and my immediate question was like, okay, well, how old were they? And they were like, well, they were probably a little smaller than a dove.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, a lot of those probably didn't make it
There
to
may
an
be
older
4 of
age
those.
class. So
Yeah, 4 of those still
I'd be
alive.
careful
Right.
about making a call on whether or not things are going well based on seeing one hen. I mean, that's great that she hatched
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
but you need more data than that to really start getting into how well things are going.
So it's important to
So,
monitor them on into summer, not just during that
yeah,
early phase.
well, and come up with a system where maybe you have, let's say you're putting out 5 cameras.
Yeah.
Well, keep up with how many observations are you getting of hens, and then how many of those observations do they have poults in,
Mm-hmm.
and then how many poults are in each group.
Mm-hmm.
So you can establish a pattern of observation and use, that after you've done it for a while to come up with your index for the year.
So here's it will take this to a deeper level, and I wasn't planning on going here, but I'm going to put you on the spot on this one because the question popped up in my mind while you were talking just now.
You're putting me on the spot a bunch.
Yeah,
this
yeah.
episode.
So I'm thinking about if a landowner did this, all the data that they could collect. So they could collect, just total number of poult images, total number of hen images, total number of Jake and Tom images. They could look at average brood size for hens that do have a brood. They could look at number of poults or number of hens with poults, number of hens without poults, right? There's lots of different ways to look at this. Of everything that I just listed, and there's probably something that I didn't think of too.
Well, there's a few other things that I think are important.
Okay, well that's what I want you to. That's what I want you to go into. So, which of those metrics do you think is it important to quantify, and what inferences would you make based off of what you find?
So that's a great
And
question.
I'm
I
happy
think
to
that
I'm happy to jump in and help you, Marcus. I have some ideas too.
yeah, well, I think the problem with this is these are things that we're trying to work out.
Yeah.
So one thing I would note, we have a standardized survey. If you're doing this on your property, or if you're seeing turkeys from between June and August, go and report that on your state agency
Yeah.
website in
If
their
they have a
standardized
pathway to
survey.
allow you to do that, definitely do it.
Yeah. So I'm encouraging everyone to do that. We do use that data in Florida. I am actively working with the state agency to try to use those data to do things for turkeys that are
And
important.
in addition to that,
So
you and I have actually talked about using data from other states in analyses as well. We have a lot of ideas that we could use that
yes.
bird survey
So
data for
yeah,
to
that
look at, like, for example, maybe we want to look at, large scale weather patterns and how that affects hatches across the South.
right. Yeah, or the cicada hatch, or
Right.
there you can look at long-term
Or
trends
changes in
at that scale.
regulations.
Right. So that was my plug for make sure that you're contributing to that, because it just contributes to a better database
Hmm.
for us to be able to answer questions like that. But while we're on that subject, one of the things I would point out is we have decided that metric as a whole. I'm talking about the turkey community, and this was done independent of me. I was not involved when this was decided. That metric, the number of poults recruited per hen, is a really important metric. And ultimately, in terms of a life stage analysis where you're trying to project lambda in a population, that's ultimately the number you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
How many female poults are being recruited
Right.
per hen? So, of course, you can't tell in the image, but we assume that about half of the poults that we see are female, and that's how we get to that number.
Hmm.
So that, I think, is an important metric. It also allows you to compare to what you're seeing on your property to what we're trying to collect across the range of turkeys. So generally, the rule of thumb is that if you're over 2 poults per hen, things are going pretty well. The problem with that I have seen is there's a lot of variability,
Yeah.
especially year to year, but that's where we might get into some problems on a smaller property without many observations. That there's so much variability, it's hard to capture those trends, I think, in that case.
Or even, I think you made an important point. On small properties, it's going to be particularly important that you not put too much stock in 1 year's estimate, right? Maybe
Yeah.
even a couple of years estimate, because the smaller area that you're surveying, the more variability that you're going to have just through
Yeah.
that sampling variance, right?
Right.
But even on larger properties, I think this is an important point to make too, as we discussed with Chris Mormon not too long ago on the show, across that statewide North Carolina study, that recruitment went from like 0 to 40% from 1 year to the next, right? And so that we mentioned that in a previous episode, not to make people feel helpless that they can't affect brood success, they can't affect recruitment, but rather just as something to make them aware that if they see, let's just say I've got a landowner and they do this for the first time, and it happens to be the year after they started doing a bunch of timber harvest on the property, right? And it goes down and they find, they don't get a single picture of a poult all summer. Well, it would be easy to imagine that they'd start questioning their decision on whatever management
Right.
action that they implemented. And what I'm saying here is don't do that. Don't fall into that trap. Should you consider whether or not the action that you took affected turkeys? Certainly. But, if you get 0% in a given year, it may not be related to anything that you did. Now,
Yeah.
there's one point of clarification that I want to make here, because I did see where some people were discussing, where we mentioned the North Carolina poult per hen data. I've seen where they've just been discussing that online before, and they were saying, so was their point that it can go from like 0 to 40% and back down to 0 again, and it doesn't matter what the manager does? Like, that's, management doesn't matter. That's not what we were saying at all. What we were saying is that there's natural annual variation that you're not going to change. That's related to things
Yeah.
that are completely outside of our control. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to dampen those oscillations through management, right? So we
Well,
want,
one thing I was going to add, we asked Chris Mormon this question, how much of the landscape is high quality brooding cover, and he essentially said none.
yeah, that's right.
So we're seeing, I think that's kind of one of the leading hypotheses, that the habitat might do exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
It may smooth out that variation, but I haven't seen that data collected in a
No.
place that has really high quality brooding cover.
Yeah. So
So
what
it's
may
not
happen
clear.
is, if we take it from, what we're typically seeing on properties is 4 or 5% brooding cover, and what if we take that to 15 or 20%? Well, then maybe in the year where we would have produced 0 poults, instead, we've got, like, I don't know, maybe it goes up to 50 or 60, 50
Yeah.
or 60% survival in that year. Probably not that
Yeah.
high, but what if we
Yeah,
at least get
you
20 or
could
30?
you could it could do a couple of things, right? One, if you think about, I'm thinking about like an oscillating graph, over time, you basically have highs and lows in this squiggly line across time.
Yeah, like a sine wave.
Yeah. I don't know if our audience necessarily all know what that is, but
It's just just think of a figure that depicts waves going across the screen, peaks
yeah,
and
it's
valleys.
just a wave where you have maybe, let's say, the height of that is 50 or 60%, and the low of that might be near 0%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you imagine that being a string that's sort of wavy, what you were just saying is habitat. We could basically be like us grabbing the ends of that string and pulling it.
Mm-hmm.
So the waves start to get, the high and low gets closer together.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just straightening that string out.
It's more of a flat line.
Yeah. The other thing that could happen is you keep the same amount of waviness of it, but you move the mean of it up.
So you take that whole string and you slide it up higher on the graph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's still wavy, but the highs are higher and the lows are higher.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that we have really great information about which one of those is true, but I would venture to guess we probably move the line up.
Yeah.
More than we suppress the waves.
Yeah.
So the highs are higher and the lows are higher.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that because we've kind of seen this steady decrease over time since the 90s in poult per hen in a bunch of states, and I'm kind of viewing that as the line staying squiggly, but it's moving down.
Yeah. Right.
So that being said, I think that we do have. I know that I have been contacted with quite a few anecdotes where, in years, things don't seem to be that good at the broad scale, but on individual properties where they're doing some really good stuff, everything seems to be good.
Yeah.
And we see local holdouts in turkey populations
we absolutely
where
do.
the population seems to be doing awesome.
Yeah.
Compared to the rest of it around them.
Yeah.
So we do have anecdotes to suggest that you have some control over this, even at the property level.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we definitely still talk to landowners that are killing a turkey per 100 acres. I mean, that's a very high harvest density, but it's happening, and they've done that every year for many years and seen that it's sustainable.
Yep. And even in some of those cases, they still feel like they have as many turkeys as they ever did.
Yeah.
Even though the rest of the state as a whole might be seeing a substantial decline.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that is important. And to go back to your question about what data is important on that camera, I think the poult per hen, that one's important. And I wouldn't really be counting that until they're chicken sized, really. Like that's when you're starting to get a more robust estimate because their
And I was
survival's
thinking,
pretty
I
high
agree
then.
with that. And I was also thinking that on most of these metrics, I'm definitely going to look at the annual estimate, but I'm probably more likely what I would be working towards is collecting data so that I can calculate like 3-year averages. So I want to
Yeah.
compare, let's just say
We start
20.
to plot them over time, and then they start to
Exactly.
mean a lot
Exactly.
more.
So like what if my 2024 through 2026 brood camera surveys show that, I'm running around 1.5 poults per hen, but over that time period, I'm making a lot of habitat improvements to my property. Well, then from 2027 to 2029, if I see that it goes from 1.5 to 2.2, then that's when I start thinking, okay, well, I've made some improvements and this is what the response has been.
Yeah. When you think about if you line up 5 to 8, 10 years, something like that, and it's going to bounce up and down across years. But if you draw a line through that and see what that mean looks
That's
like,
right.
what does the trajectory of that
Yeah.
line look like?
Yeah, so this is something you're going to have to be consistent with for sure.
Yeah, which is hard to stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're getting discouraged by it, or maybe you do one and it's like, oh man, all my hens had 10 poults. I'm good.
Yeah.
You could see that going.
I don't
either
think
way,
that
I
person
guess.
is probably worrying with a camera survey. They probably
Probably
already
not.
know what they got.
Yeah, like I'm hearing gobbling everywhere. I'm not worried about a camera survey, although that may not matter to some.
I'm having a hard time pinpointing this bird because all these other birds are screaming at me at the same time.
Yeah. What do you do when you can't count all the birds in the image because there's so many? So
poults per hen, we hammered on a lot.
Yeah, I think another important metric that has some significance, but it's not necessarily focused on very much, is how many hens do you see that are adults that don't have them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was going to be my next most important one too.
Yeah, so I think that's an important metric, and you could just calculate that as, how many observations of hens do you get with no poults?
Yeah.
So that one, that hen may have failed to attempt to reproduce, or she may have failed to successfully nest, or she may have attempted, successfully nested, and lost the poults. So you're not sure what the problem is there, but it's a pretty good indicator that there's a problem.
That's right.
So I think that's another one that you can get. Another couple of things that I think are important that I don't hear talked about are you can start to get into some pretty interesting things that are local to your property about reproduction and the population just chronologically. Because when you get estimates of the poult age, you can backdate very generally to when that nest hatched.
Absolutely.
Which then you could backdate to when she attempted a nest.
That's right.
Right, and that can be important for you to determine things like when do I need to have my high quality brood cover present, or when do I need to target trapping if you want to try to maximize the probability of success on that practice.
Yeah, and I think with that too, I would wait to start. Basically, any brood that you get photographs of. Let's go ahead and age those. The younger they are, probably the more accurately you can age them. Let's go ahead and age all those, and you can start you an Excel spreadsheet. And then, over time, like once you've amassed data on, let's just say a minimum of like 10, maybe 20 broods, depending on property size, then that's when you can start to look at, okay, I have these 10 broods, and on average, I backdated them to an incubation initiation date of, let's just say, April 20th, right? So then, you want to make sure that you have an adequate sample size before you start trying to make that determination, because timing of nesting is going to be a bell curve.
Yeah. Well, and I was also going to talk about that same thing, that it's a bell curve, so you should see that emerge over time, and you need lots of data to see that. But also think about what that means. The poults are not going to be the same age.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to see a whole bunch of poults that are all the same age.
Right.
You're going to see a bunch of, hopefully, mini broods that have various age classes. And one of them that was recently sent to me, the image had 3 hens with 3 broods, and you could tell they all 3 had a brood because there were 3 size classes of poults in the same brood.
Yeah.
Or in the same, group.
Yeah. It's called brood amalgamation.
Yes. There's your $3 word for today. Yeah, so, that you can glean a few things. One, you should expect there to be some variation, but depending on how far those are, and if you're backdating them, you could probably start to work out whether or not they were probably initial nest or second nest, even, or further, because I think it was yesterday or just a few days ago, I got a picture from somebody asking me about poults, like how old are these, and they were like, I would guess 10 days old.
Yeah.
In the South, deep South. Those are late.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that's probably a renesting attempt.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about how awesome this data could be over time.
Yeah.
If you kept doing this for 10 years, you might be able to start to determine whether or not not just that management made them more successful, but you may start seeing poults at older ages earlier, which is another good indicator.
Mm-hmm.
That the early nesting attempts are probably doing better.
Yeah.
There's just to me, it's fun to think about that.
It is fun to think about.
You could start building it out over time, and if you're working with neighboring landowners, you could start comparing to one another,
Mm-hmm.
getting better data.
And if you can expand your survey out at that larger scale, then that is the data that I would base my decisions off of too.
Yeah. So, and I'm actually giving myself ideas because I know in the Florida data, we have an estimate of age.
Yeah.
And over time, you could start to look at that at broader scales.
Yeah.
Are you seeing shifts in the timing of reproduction, based on when you're seeing poults on the ground? Like, those are cool questions.
Are you starting to see more successful first nest attempts, for example? Like, these are things that research has never looked at.
Yeah. But we have the data at the state level in several states where this could probably be done already.
Right.
Like, there's a substantial amount of data to kind of start looking under the hood on this.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought about as far as making inferences from these data, and again, like, you don't know that this is the case. You don't know that this is the way that you should interpret the data for a fact, but maybe it's, it's reasonable to assume, like, for example, if you see the average number of poults for hens that have poults, maybe that number stays consistent over time, but what you start seeing is that there's more hens without them, right? So to me, what that would tell me is, okay, well, I still have a couple of hens that are able to find really good nesting cover on my property. And like I said, you can't be guaranteed that that's the case. Maybe those hens are just really good at it for some reason, But
well, one of those reasons might be that they select good places.
Exactly. That is one of those reasonable, assumptions that you could make. But okay, so my 2 hens, they've still been doing a good job, but I'm starting to see, from the remaining hens on my property that none of them are having poults. Well, maybe that's a sign that I need more nesting cover, right? So the ones that nest in my good stuff are able to produce, but there's not enough of my good stuff.
Yeah.
So if I start seeing brood size go up and poultless hens go down, then I know that I'm really moving the needle, right? Because I've got more hens successful, and then per successful brood, they're larger.
Well, and I'm curious to see how you respond to this, but I was trying to think about, well, what are the predictions? You're essentially trying to make inferences based on this, and
right.
You need to take some caution and the sample size issue, but it's also fun to talk about,
Yeah.
What would be symptoms of different problems
Yeah.
in this data. So if you had, you could kind of look at the number of hens without poults, or maybe I should pose this as a question to you. What would you expect to be happening if you see a large number, or what would be the differences in what you would assume is happening if you see many hens with a couple of poults?
Mm-hmm.
Like most hens have poults, but there are just a few.
Yeah.
Versus there are many hens without poults, but the ones that have poults have many.
I would guess I would infer that there are bottlenecks at different life stages in those two situations. So, yeah, so in the situation where you have many hens with few poults, my guess would be that nest success is relatively high, which would indicate that you probably got pretty good nesting cover, but maybe like the brooding cover is inadequate. And then if you have few hens with poults, but the ones that do have them have a lot of them, then I would assume that you've got poor nesting cover, but high quality brooding cover.
Yeah, that's where I would have went.
It's fun to play these thought experiments, though.
Well, I was going to say that people are getting a glimpse, because you and I have not discussed this at great length, but this is the kind of discussion we have, and we start to work out what our hypotheses are, what our predictions are, and we're doing it based on the biology of the animal and what we would expect to be, the response variable.
That's right.
In that case, and then we start to go further and try to work out, well, how do you test that hypothesis? And that's
do
where we get into
do we have the data already to do it, which is what you always hope for, because you want to jump into that head first as quickly as you can, but sometimes we got to go back and collect more.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about having.
Oh, they're making your milkshake. Or is it a McFlurry?
Actually, for some reason,
you found the only McDonald's in the country with a working milkshake machine.
I've already had 3 this morning. Was getting hyped up for the show. No, for some reason, some people like to turn on the hand blowing machine, to blow off your hands.
Yeah.
They like to turn that on and then immediately walk out of the bathroom.
Oh, okay. So what has it accomplished at that point?
Yeah, just making a lot of background noise for the show. So it was either occasionally hear people going, in and out of the bathroom, or having to listen to music in the background the whole time. So I chose.
Okay.
I
like to listen. Sound. I usually prefer to listen to people go to the bathroom over music, so I'm glad you chose that.
Well, I'm not listening to them go to the bathroom. It's just the door opening.
I know, it was just the way you said it. You made it sound like you had to choose between the two, and I was like, "Oh, that's an interesting choice."
In other news, yeah. So, if anybody is in northern Michigan right now, you may have come to McDonald's while I was recording this.
Somewhere around Pine Creek Road and Olson Road. I'm looking at that map behind you.
Okay. I was like, I don't even know those road names.
Well, you don't have to worry about getting lost around there, Marcus. You just go to McDonald's and you got a whole wall for a map.
Yep. So, yeah, I think that's really fun, and I have been told by numerous people who've reached out that they like to see kind of what's going on in the background with us, like when we're trying to work out hypotheses and how we're determining what to measure and those kinds of things. So you're kind of getting some firsthand. We're doing that in real time for you right now.
Yeah, I have the most fun with those questions like you posed earlier, which are that you come up with ideas, you form hypotheses, and then the most enjoyable part to me is like, what would we expect to see in the data if this was happening versus that was happening? And if, and that's what I guess the point we're trying to convey is that if landowners will spend time thinking about the data that they have, if they choose to do this, you can come up with some really creative ways at getting at different questions. that might interest you from a management or just a curiosity perspective?
Yeah. Well, that's driving a lot of it for us. It's just curiosity, but you could also start to make inferences, right?
Hmm.
About not just what's going on, but how things are changing as you change things.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you particularly those two metrics, you start to work out, well, how many hens don't have poults versus, what does that ratio look like of hens without poults to hens with poults, and then the number of poults per hen. You start to look at those over time with enough data, you could start to determine, okay, I did X, Y, and Z, and now my nesting success seems to be higher, and I need to work on the poult
Yeah.
because I've
That's right.
seen a stable, number of poults per hen. Of
Right.
course, they're not uh, they're not mutually exclusive either, which is important to point out. You would tend to have a lower poult per hen ratio if you tend to have fewer hens with poults.
That's right.
So, you know, keep that in mind.
Yeah, and to be clear, you want to include those broodless hens in your calculation of overall poult per hen ratios.
But it may be worth it for you to look at this in another way as well and say, okay, if a hen has poults, what is the average? So you're sort of like
Hmm.
a hurdle process is what we
That's
call
right.
that in the model attempt, where you have to meet one criteria first before you evaluate a second criteria.
That's right.
Well, in this case, you might want to look at the overall poults per hen, which would include hens with and without poults. And then you could do the proportion of hens that don't have poults. That could be your second criteria, right? Or your second metric that you're looking at. But you could have a third metric that's more like that hurdle process where you say, okay, if the hens have poults, so now your sample size is only hens that have poults. Now, how many poults per hen are there? So that's kind of getting you at brood size,
That's right.
right? And that could have additional value.
Yeah. Well, if you had told me going into today that we were going to talk about how to do poult brood surveys, I probably would have been a little bit concerned because the way that I traditionally think of these is at the statewide scale, or how we would do it for an experiment. But obviously, landowners are not looking to do this, accomplish the same thing that we are. And I think this is a potential tool that could, you know, it's just like one more piece of information, right? I mean, that's all it is that could help you get a more comprehensive look at your property and maybe even get a little bit of insight into how what you're doing is affecting things. Um, but like you said, the more you think about it, the more creative you get, the more that you can tease out of it as far from a utility perspective.
Yeah, but again, having the caveat, be careful not to jump to conclusions.
Right.
Right, you're limited by sample size and the amount of variability that's inherent to the system.
That's right.
It's the same caution you would give to anybody for anything else. Like, don't assume that since you don't have any broods, that work you did last year on brooding cover was all for nothing. Or that this year all my hens have broods, and it was the only year I trapped. Well, that may be because of it, or it may be some other variation that's natural to the system that has nothing to do with what you did.
Sure. Exactly.
So that's why we're trying to caution you to make sure that you're taking this as another data point in the overall look at what's going on, and not jumping to conclusions based on inadequate data, regardless of what you're trying to make inference about.
That's right. But let's be honest, almost everybody is going to be habitat or trapping. They're going to make some
Oh, yeah.
habitat change and they're going to want to see an improvement, or they're going to trap and want to see an improvement. And you may not. But That's why, like if any of you have ever sent us anything about, hey, I started trapping this year, and then all of a sudden, I'm getting all these poults on camera. It's like, well, that's great, and it may have been because you trapped, or it may have been because of something completely different.
That's another thing you can do is compare your numbers to what you're seeing at the state level, which the states make that, they generally put out some sort of
That's
report
right.
to let you know
That's right.
what that looks like, and that can help. That's another data point where you
Yeah.
can compare and have more certainty about whether or not what you're doing caused what you're seeing, or is that
Yeah.
just something that's going on at a broader scale.
Mm-hmm. Or it's like, maybe one year you do a bunch of burning and you think, oh, well, I should obviously see a positive response now, but maybe it actually goes down the following, poult rearing season. But that may have likewise had nothing to do with your burning. Now, what I would expect to see, my hypothesis would be that if you go from a property that is, not receiving any prescribed fire annually to one that's receiving a substantial amount, let's just say they're burning a third of the uplands every year, well then over a not every year, but you see every cycle. Did I say every year at first? I don't mean to imply to people that they should be burning every year, but anyways,
Well, they're burning a third
they're
every
burning
year.
something every year. Exactly. That's what I meant. Thanks for the
Yeah.
help, Ed. But if you do that over 5, 10 years and you see an increase, then that's what I would expect, to be a
Yeah.
reasonable conclusion. That it's like,
Well, and I
okay,
think
yeah,
you're looking at the trend, and the trend is probably stronger than any individual data point.
that's right. That's what I was trying to say. Thanks, Marcus.
That being said, keep in mind that it's, this is one reason that we're encouraging you to stack response variables, right? Look at multiple things collectively, and then look at it at multiple scales, temporally and spatially if you can. You're just adding strength to your inference.
Yeah. Cool.
So,
well, I didn't think we would talk about surveying poults the entire episode, but
I figured we would find plenty to talk about. I did not think that this would be the direction necessarily that it went.
Yeah.
But I think that's why this is fun, right?
That's
we're
right.
enjoying it because we're getting to pick each other's brain, and people, that are listening out there seem to be enjoying hearing us work things out like this.
And you know what else I think will excite our listeners?
What's that?
We have something else to give away today.
Are you serious?
We do. Well, actually,
Yeah.
You know what? No one ever claimed that trumpet call.
Really?
Yes. So
I was going to ask you about that.
No one ever reached out to me. I can't remember the name we called, but I mean, you can go back and listen to that episode, but it's still out there, but I never heard from anybody.
I think we should come up with some kind of standard. If you don't reach out by X number of weeks later, that we're going to give it away again.
Well, I mean, I think definitely if we're recording again and they still haven't reached out to us, we should go ahead and give it away.
Okay.
So should I
put is that what we have? Is that what we have to give away again?
No, we have something else too. So do you think we should do
let's
both?
Let's give away the new thing.
Let's give away the new thing, and we'll do the trumpet another time. Okay, so
I think we should give people a little bit of time, because I know several people tell me that they binge on the show.
That's a good point too.
They stack several episodes up and then listen to them all at once.
Okay, well that's fair. They should be listening every week though.
Well, I'm not going to tell people what they should and shouldn't be doing.
I'm just giving them help. Okay. So my point is, Marcus, if you have not left us a rating and review, now is a good time to do it, because we've got a bunch of Grounded brand stuff to give away.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So today our giveaway is a Grounded featherweight hoodie in Bottomland.
Nice.
I mean, we're up in our game now, giving away trumpet calls, custom made, hand turned trumpet calls, and Bottomland Grounded brand hoodies. I mean,
yeah.
People, come on.
Well, and we do we do actually have another custom call.
Oh,
Yeah. So we'll wait on that one.
okay. All right. So if you have not given us a rating and review, folks, please go ahead and do that. And then our semi-random, pseudo-random process of me scrolling around um, like I've had too much caffeine and closing my eyes and pointing to one of these is never going to choose you if you don't leave a review. All right. So please leave us one. All right. So today we have got the Grounded Featherweight hoodie in Bottomland, and that is from Grounded brand. My buddy Drew Abel. He works, with Grounded brand. And he was nice enough to reach out to us, and so he's given us stuff to give away for the next 4 episodes. Um, and so we've got this hoodie, and we've got face mask and gloves and hats and shirts coming up.
Yeah.
So get them in there. But today, the lucky winner of the hoodie is Brock Peacock. I don't think that's his real name, Marcus.
I don't know. I think I know a Brock Peacock.
But Brock Peacock left us a review. It was 5 stars, and he said, "I like turkeys."
Yeah, I think he did that because one episode previously we said that's what your review should say. Wasn't it me picking on you about something?
Well, I thought I said something about, folks, y'all don't have to make this difficult. Just go on there and say, "I like turkeys." Or you said it. I don't know. Maybe
I don't know.
Maybe you said it and I repeated it at some point. But if Brock the Peacock will reach out, he'll be the proud owner of a new Grounded brand hoodie. And I think that Drew is going to ship those directly to our the listeners that receive them.
Okay.
So Brock, if you reach out to me, get me your contact info. I'll put you in touch with Drew. He'll make sure to get your size and all that stuff.
Nice. Well, we really appreciate the support. People, there have been quite a few people contact us about donating something to give away, and we really appreciate that. And of course, we appreciate the support from everybody in the audience. I mean, we have realized now we have so many questions and things. Like, we've got content for a while. Like this episode was driven by people asking us questions about poults, particularly on how to figure out what's going on their own property. And you can see what that did. So the support from the audience has just been so tremendous, and we really appreciate it. Thanks everybody that's rated the podcast and left us comments and filled out our survey and all those things. We really appreciate all the support, and I think we should continue to do this for a while because there's a lot of great questions that we've gotten in that survey to address things like this that people can implement on their own property. Yeah. And I really like focusing on things like that, to be honest with you.
I do too. And
like, what can people do on their land to try to help turkeys and try to help them monitor what, responses of turkeys to what they're doing.
Yeah, and leave us any of those questions that y'all have. If you haven't gotten a chance to ask them yet, piece it into your review. Because I went through a bunch of those reviews today specifically to look for questions that people had.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the last few episodes we went through, comments on social media, or where people were asking questions. So we're trying to keep up with with what people are asking about, what they're wondering about, and trying to build episodes around that. And that's where this came from.
One thing that I'm curious about that I'll put out to our listeners, and if y'all want to reach out to us and share your thoughts, that would be much appreciated. But I wonder where people are discussing episodes, if there is any online discussion, really taking place, and if so, where that's happening. Because I think last year we did a little bit more on social media for every episode. We would put together some clips and reels and things like that, and I felt like that was where a lot of the conversation was happening. But I wasn't looking for it elsewhere, so it may have been going on there at the same time, and I just wasn't aware of it. But y'all tell us, like, did y'all like that format? Do you want us to have social post associated with episodes where you can discuss and ask questions, or maybe you have other areas that are more preferred where you like to have those conversations. Either way, just let us know.
Yeah, and ironically, I don't really get on social media to look around and engage in those kinds of conversations.
Right.
I'm pretty much using it to try to get information to
Right.
people. And I would be really curious if there. I know that it's happened because I get tagged in things occasionally, and I get brought into conversations, so I see that. So I know that that's happening in some places. But I kind of wonder: is there a place where people have just really, started to focus on some of our content? That'd be really interesting to know.
Yeah. I mean,
So
that was one thing that I did enjoy about having a social post for an episode, was it did end up being kind of a
yeah,
centerpiece for conversation.
yes, I like that as well.
Not always
And
positive conversation.
oh no, definitely not always positive. I
But
would say we have even started getting more balanced
we have.
feedback.
Yeah.
This positive and negative. So, and that's
Yeah,
fine. We need
we've
need
had
all
some people
kinds.
hit us with the old "Why did you air that?" on some recent content.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that's important for us to talk about. We are trying to be responsive to our audience, but we're also trying to be balanced and
yeah,
give different scientists and managers and practitioners a platform to share information about things that they know about that maybe we know about or don't.
yeah. And the other
Uh,
thing too, I think that's important to point out is when you have a guest on to interview, you can only push back so much and remain professional and polite, right? And
yeah,
so if you push back a few times, like you and I have had to do in some episodes before, if that person chooses not to engage, or they choose to, talk about something else and not answer the question, it gets to a point where you can't pursue them a whole lot further on that. So um, just know that, but just because you haven't seen us necessarily argue with someone over something that maybe isn't data backed, it doesn't mean that we necessarily are agreeing with them. It's just that, and I'm just gonna speak for myself right now, Marcus, but I'm still trying to figure out, as a podcaster, where that line is and how to delicately handle some of those issues where someone is saying something that is clearly not backed by the best available evidence, but and we want to push back on it, but we also don't want to be rude to our guest.
yeah. One, I think the same thing could be said. There are things like a lot of what we talked about today. We are using our knowledge and experience to come up with something that might be helpful to landowners. But to be clear, this is still something that we don't know the best way to go about it with the
Yeah.
brood survey stuff. So, there are times where we're having discussions with people and there are multiple opinions being laid out, and there's not enough data to say who's right or wrong.
That's right.
Right? And we may not agree with someone that we're talking to, but we also may not have strong ground to stand on to refute it either.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it's important to keep that in context. And I think a lot of our audience appreciate that we are giving people a platform that we don't agree with sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's part of this. It's not
right.
easy.
No.
But we definitely have had some recent scrutiny because people are like, well, I don't know what to think.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of the point. We're trying to explore these topics, from multiple angles.
Yeah.
And sometimes the data isn't clear on what we should think.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's why I think there's no one really coming out publicly right now and saying this is why turkeys are declining. So you guys, in a way, have been able to accompany us on this journey of us trying to learn more about the current situation and trying to unravel all the data that we have to try to, tease out some trends that might be enough to give us a hypothesis to pursue.
Yeah, that's right. And I think a strong part of that is hearing competing ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So, even if they compete with your own ideas, it's important to hear out that conversation and, let's see what's left standing.
Agreed.
What holds up to scrutiny. So, yeah, difficult to do, but it's something that we're challenged with. That's our role as scientists, and we're trying.
That's right.
So,
all right.
On a positive note, I have been enjoying all these people tagging me with hens with a bunch of poults.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're out there and you're posting stuff, please tag us.
Mm-hmm.
I love seeing it.
Yeah.
I share as many as I can. Happy to try to promote turkeys in any way that I can. I'm trying to cast a positive light on them and keep them at the forefront of the conversation. And I really enjoy when folks tag me. Man, some photographers have tagged me in a bunch of stuff. I mean, the imagery that they're creating, capturing with turkeys is just so phenomenal. But folks sending me trail cam images with 20 poults in a picture, like that kind of stuff, man, it kind of keeps me passionate, like, or that's not the right word.
Motivated.
It keeps me motivated. There you go.
Yeah.
Keeps me going.
Yeah.
It's like
same here.
Refueling every time I see it.
Yeah.
It's refueling the car.
And if you've tagged me in one of those and I haven't posted it, it's probably because I saw it after it expired. That happens a lot. I'll get on there and I'll see so and so tagged you in this and that and the other, and I'm like, oh man, I bet that I don't. What frustrates me is I can't even see what it was, what the post was.
I know.
And I was like, oh, that was probably the best post of all time, and I missed it.
Well, I realized, like, a couple episodes ago, I haven't responded to several because they're going into the spam folder.
Yeah, that too.
And I don't know how to change that.
That too.
But I missed several. So if I missed one, that may have been why. So.
Yeah, it's easy to see why Instagram confuses questions about turkeys with solicitation.
It's easy.
It's a little sarcasm, folks. All right.
Yeah.
We done here?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, man.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Thanks, everybody.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.